Hello there, good evening and welcome to the Monday edition of Political Lens on Voice of the People Television. I am Chukwuma Okoro. Now, in the next 1 hour, we're going to look into the recent recommendations for the creation of 31 additional states in Nigeria. All right, before we get into all of that, please kindly click on the subscription button. On YouTube, we are Voice of the People TV, and on other social media platforms, we are at VOP TV Live. You can also visit our website for other trending stories. On website, we are www.vop.ng. Now, let's bring in our guests. We are joined by Dr. Henry Duru from our Oka outstation. Dr. Henry is a communication expert and political affairs analyst. We also have Mr. Blessed Jato. He's the executive director of Kadosh Initiative for Justice and Environmental Development, and is also political advisor to the United Nations and ECOWAS peace support operations in Africa. Gentlemen, welcome to the show. Henry, good evening, and good to have you on the show. Good evening, Henry. Good evening, Mr. Jato.
Good evening. Thank you for having me.
Good to see you. Good evening, Henry. That's Mr. Jato from Benin outstation. Henry, can we hear your voice, please? Can we get your feed, your audio feed? All right, then. Dr. Henry Duru is yet to join us. But before he joins us, let's get into it. Last week, the House of Representatives Committee on Constitutional Review, headed by Deputy Speaker of the House, Benjamin Kalu, recommended for the creation of 31 additional states in Nigeria, bringing the total number of states to 67. However, the House leadership has defended itself and said that the recommendations did not emanate from the House, but were private member bills sent to the House. According to the recommendations, the Northeast, with 6 states already, will get 4 new states. The Northwest, which has 7 states, will get 4 additional states. North Central, with 6 states, will get 7 new states. Southeast, with 5 states, will get another 5 states. And already down by 1, when compared with other states, will get 5 new states. Now, Southwest, with 6 states, will get 7 new states. And South-South, which has 6, will get 4 new states. If the government goes ahead to uphold recommendations, the distribution of states according to the regions will be like this. Now, Southwest, 13 states. South-South, 10 states. Southeast, 10 states. Northwest, 11. North Central, 13. And Northeast, 11 states. Since recommendations hit the newswave, Nigerians of all walks of life have been commenting on the propriety of the move or otherwise of it. Now, the highly regarded Pan-Yoruba socio-political group, Afenifere, has condemned it, even as elder statesman Olabode George, former deputy national chairman of the PDP, said that Nigeria doesn't need new states at the moment, but should practice true federalism to give more powers to the federating units and make the center less attractive. Similarly, the Apex Igbo Sociocultural Group, Ohaneze, speaking through its factional Deputy President General, Okechukwu Isuguzoro, has rejected recommendations, adding that the Nigerian state should create 2 additional states for the Southeast before embarking on the creation of new states. Now, going forward, if you look at the creation of states as proposed, you will see that in 1963, okay, now let's look at the history of state creation in Nigeria. In 1963, Midwest was carved out of the Western region, making it 4 regions at that point. In 1967, those regions were divided into 12 states by General Yakubu Gowon during the Civil War, at the beginning of the Civil War. That's in 1967. In 1976, military head of state Olusegun Obasanjo created additional 7 states and brought the number of states to 19. In 1987, military president Ibrahim Babangida created Akwa Ibom and Katsina states, making it 21 states. Nigeria became a 21-state country. In 1991, the same military president Babangida created additional 7 states, bringing the number of states to 30. Now, in October 1993, General Sani Abacha created additional 6 states to bring Nigeria to the present 36-state structure. Well, that is it. Now, let me come to you, Mr. Jato. Mr. Jato, I want to get your broad reaction, considering the request by Nigerians for the creation of additional states. And I want you to look at the viability of the present state structure. Can we have your broad reaction to the request by Nigerians from all parts of the country that they need 31 new states to add to the 36 we already have, making it a bloated, if you like, 67 states, more than what America has. America has 50 states. Nigeria is 36 already, but we want 67 states in all. What's your broad reaction to all of that?
Right, thank you very much. Thank you for having me. Now, the call for creation of state is not a new thing. It has been there in recent time, but this is the most ridiculous. And I must start by saying Nigerians should be rest assured that this will not see the light of the day. And I will give you reasons why it will not see the light of the day. And on the issue of whether Nigerians all over the country are calling for the creation of state, I really do not know how true that assertion is, that Nigerians all over the country are calling creation of Nigerians are already, Nigeria as a country is already bedeviled by too many issues. And the creation of more states is the least things in our hierarchy of needs as it stands right now. Is it really true that Nigerians are calling for the creation of some interest group across Nigeria? We must clarify and classify it the way it is. Some groups, some sections of Nigeria are clamoring for the creation of more states, but that does not represent of the positions of Nigerians in this matter. Now, on the issue of viability, the truth is the current state we are having as it stands right now, many of them have shown symptoms of being unviable. Many of them are struggling to survive. Many of them cannot meet the basic needs, provide the basic necessity for indigents. And yet we are calling for the balkanization of the country. One of the things that I must state very clear, which we must put on the table, is the fact that one of the ways to weaken any group, whether a family, a group, or an organization, is to balkan them. Once you begin to break and divide into small pieces and atoms, what you're doing, you are removing the collective strength and the ability of that group or that entity to be able to negotiate in a wider scale. Now, we have states across the country who, at the end of every month, depend on largesse from the federal government to survive. Now, calling for the creation of more states simply means that you are going to be putting more burden on federal allocation. The federal government will have to now divulge more, allocate more to this balkanized entity. And the truth is that really the way to go? If you ask me, no. Nigeria have several issues we should be discussing right now. Now, when Nigerians keep using the word true federalism, let's get clear. The concept of true federalism itself is a facade. There is no such thing like true. You are either operating a federal system or you are operating a confederate system. That concept in itself has no bearing in fact, it has no bearing, it has no historical standing. So when we keep using the word true federalism to delude ourselves, it actually gets to show that we yet do not understand what we even want. Now, since the era of Lord Lugard, we have been practicing this inherited federal system of government that is not working. What that means is that we have held so tightly to a system that is not working. Now, there is this traditional way of thinking where we just hold on to things because it is the tradition, not necessarily because it is feasible, not necessarily because it is sustainable. The current federal system of government we practice in Nigeria is not sustainable, it's not feasible, it is not even a recommended option. For example, in a federal system, why I say there is nothing like true federalism in the first place. In a federal system, you have the center that have most of the power and the state that relies on the center. But in a confederate system, you have a weaker center and a stronger summit. And that is what we strongly think we need right now in Nigeria. We need a weak center and a stronger unit of the federation to make a confederation of state. Now, when that happened, first of all, why is there a call for creation of state? This whole state creation thing has his historic, is born out of historic grievance, where some people are feeling they are marginalized. There is the issue of inequitable distribution of resource. There's the issue of ethnic identity, the
All
rest
right,
of them.
Mr. Jato, I want us to talk about the viability of these states, because you mentioned something that is quite instructive, that many of these states, you said about only 3 or 4 of them are viable, then the other ones are not viable. I would like to ask you, why is it that these states are not viable? Because the last time I checked, I conducted a study, an independent study on my own. I discovered that there is no state in Nigeria of the 36 states, of the 36 federating units, there is no single state where you cannot find in the list 3 mineral resources, 3 mineral deposits that the state can develop on its own and feed itself, provide for education, staff welfare, water, health, road construction, and all of those things. Why is it that those states are not viable, even when those natural resources are deposited in those states? Is it a systemic problem? Is it a systemic failure? Is it because of the structure of the Nigerian federalism? You talked a lot about federalism. You said there is nothing like true federalism. Is either you are practicing federalism or you are not. Can you help us understand why these states are not viable, even in the midst of all these resources that have been used to develop other nations? Single resources. Can you help us understand the reason why?
All right, thank you, Mr. Okoro. Some years ago, I bought a book that is titled Escaping the Resource Curse. You see, natural resource in most parts of the world is a blessing to the states that have them. But in Africa, over the years, these resources have proven to be our curse. And all across Africa, we keep fighting and killing ourselves over these resources. Now, why are states not viable? Not because they do not have natural resource, not because they do not have material and human resource, but because there are systems, there are the wrong set of systems in place, and there is the wrong management of those resources and those systems. One of the challenges we've had over time, another reason why I have never been a proponent of the agitation state is this. Even if you create new states with the same set of people, with the same mindset, with the same system and the same structure, you will continue to have, it will be like a merry-go-round. It will be a circle that just keep reinventing itself. Why are states in Nigeria not viable? Management. Number one, the cost of governance in Nigeria is too high, and we keep creating systems that further complicate this problem. Government come, they create ministries and agencies and departments that duplicate their responsibilities. Even when you see the madness happening with the security agencies right now, the lack of synergy and coordination, you will just find out that it is all about management. The truth is, the countries that are developed, it is not an angel that developed them. It is a human that is patriotic towards his country, that decide, okay, I want to leave a legacy for my country or my state. But what we have found in Nigeria over time is that political offices, political appointments become a means of self-enrichment and self-aggrandizement. Until we remove the self from leadership and from governance, we will not get it right. So the problem is on self. Like somebody said in passing.
How do we remove that self? You know, we are trying to resolve a problem, which is, why are these states not viable? You say because we have a bloated cost of running the government. Now, you also say that, look, because the people that are, according to you, is an issue of management, because they are always self-serving. How do we remove that self? Do you believe that if the states are allowed to control their resources, given what is on ground, the monies that they collect from the federation account, the way they use those monies, do you think that if they have control over their resources, over their internal resources, will they be able to fend for themselves?
See, the first thing, let me start by stating the power of man to always partake in profitable illegality when there are no sanctions, when there are no limitations. That is one. Now, we state be viable, will it be better if state control the resources? So that is the first step. That will not be the total cure to the problem. It is a good starting step when states have control over their resources and they are better able to plan with it. It will also help to create internal accountability within that state. Because right now the excuse is, it is Abuja. We don't have control over S, Y, and Z. It is Abuja. So governments at state and local government level continue to hide under that excuse, it is Abuja. When states have control over their resource, number one, that excuse will be eliminated. That it is Abuja kind of excuse. So you have also asked, how do we remove this self? You see, I strongly believe most of the problem we have in Africa, the solution to them is cultural. We must retrace our step, ourselves. We must begin to find cultural solutions to most of the problem we are having right now. You look at every facet of the Nigerian society, all the different ills. Many times, certain things happen, we just want to criminalize a set of people that are doing a particular thing. Why to this thing, which also apply to governance, is we must find cultural solution. There is a way we used to live our lives before the infiltration of westernization and globalization. As a very...
We need to take care of cultural problems, the cultural problems that probably were more like without the cultural impurities, that we inherited from Western culture. Mr. Jato, hold on. Let's get a reaction from our guest in Oka. I will come back to you in the course of the show. Good evening, Dr. Henry Duru, and good to have you. I can't hear you. I can't get your audio. Hello, Henry, can you hear me? Unfortunately, I can't hear you.
Oh.
All right, Henry,
can you hear me now?
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Very well.
I can hear you loud and clear.
Very well.
Yes.
We are discussing state creation. You are not a stranger to it. Last week, there were recommendations coming from the Constitutional Review Committee headed by the Deputy Speaker of the House of Representatives, Benjamin Carlo, and they are recommending 31 new states, 31 additional states to the 36 we have, that will bring it to 67 states in all. I want to have your broad reaction. Are you for or against the creation of these states? And what are your reasons for or against? Quick one.
First of all, I am not comfortable with that proposal, especially considering the number of the states being proposed for creation. My reason is simply that our is not the number of states that we have. Rather, our problem is that of inability to manage the state machinery. So by the time you begin to multiply that same incompetent machinery, then you are multiplying incompetence. Remember that today, a lot of persons are advocating that we go back to regionalism, that when we had 3 regions, 4 regions, that the nation was performing better. And it appears that things have continued to get worse. And that coincides with even multiplication that we had. We have had 12 states, 21 states, 30 states. And I don't think we have actually fared better with the number increasing. So for that reason, I am not convinced that we are going to take an inch further towards solving our problem with this creation of states. And also, considering the fact that state institutions are already weak and a lot of persons are exploiting the loopholes to loot the nation, to embezzle our commonwealth, and to engage in all sorts of corrupt practices. So by the time you multiply these institutions that are already weak, that accommodate a lot of loopholes that people exploit, then you create more thieves, more embezzlers. And by the time you know that, the very little resources that we have in more private pockets. So for these reasons, with that proposal.
You said something about the weak institutions. The weak institutions, is there a problem of the state itself, or is there a problem of the Nigerian state's inability to strengthen the institutions that should check these excesses, that should check the malfeasance? What has it got to? I want us to understand. Is it a problem of the state, I mean the subnationals, or is it a problem of the central government?
It is the problem of the Nigerians actually. But then, the Nigerian state cannot be separated from the subnationals, because whatever that is happening has a way of going down to even the list of the units that is the local area. So what I mean is that as long as that central problem that has its roots in the state itself, that Nigerian state itself, is not resolved, creating more states is multiplying that deficient state machinery. You are multiplying it, because assuming we had 4 regions in the First Republic, for instance, and we have 4 premiers, we can say that yes, we have 4 corrupt premiers. But by the time we multiply the subnation and we have 12 states and we have 12 governors, so if the leaders are corrupt, we now have 12 corrupt governors. I
like the angle you have come now, and because if you look back, when we had regions, when we had only 4 regions, you recall the story of Okotie-Eboh. Okotie-Eboh, who was the finance minister for the Midwestern region. You know his story very well. What has number got to do with it? I mean, there were only 4 regions, and monies were missing in the Midwestern region and all of that. Recently, or in the past, there were accusations about what happened with SCB. There are also accusations about what happened in the Western region. Everything centered around corruption. So what has numbers got to do with it? I was thinking, like you said, that the problem is a central thing, because look, the center controls all these institutions. Like we have now the Anti-Graft Agency, the EFCC, the ICPC, the Code of Conduct Bureau, and all of that. These are central government agencies. Can you hear me? Okay. How about the hello, Mr. Jato, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
I was just discussing the issue of control of weak institutions with Dr. Henry Duru, our guest from our Oka outstation. Anyway, let me reserve that question for him until he comes back. Now, let's look at it this way. Since Nigeria came into being, I think the only state that was created, the only region that was carved out during a civilian regime was the 1963 creation of Midwest from the Western states. Now, 1967, Gowon was a military head of state. In 1976, Obasanjo was military head of state. In 1987, Babangida, 1991, Babangida, and 1993, Abacha. All these were military heads of state, except the 1963 creation of the Midwest. Do you think that this thing is just like a wild goose chase that the House of Representatives is doing, or that the civilian administration is doing? Because if you actually, let's even concede that, look, these states will be created, or that the bill will sail through in the National Assembly, we require 2/3 of the 36 states, that is 23 states in all, to also assent to that bill before it is eventually assented to by the president. Is there a possibility that with our front lines, with all the divisions, even within regions, even within states that are looking for more states, that this bill, if it sells through in the National Assembly, that it will sell through in the 23 states that are required to pass that bill before it's assented to by the president? Do you think it's something that will happen?
I started by making my position very clear that the whole bill thing will not see the light of the day. That was the very first statement today.
I'm saying, assuming, let us even take it for granted. Let's even take it for granted that the National Assembly, if you scale through the National Assembly, what of the States House of Assembly? Do you think with all the fault lines, like I just said, like in the Southeast now, there's a contention about which state should even be created. The same thing in the Southwest, the same thing in the South-South, even in the North Central, Northeast, and Northwest. So what I'm saying is there a possibility that a civilian regime in this country can create states like the military did with fiat and decrees?
Now, is there a possibility a civilian regime can create a state? Yes. But will this current agitation for creation of 31 states, can this National Assembly pull it through? The answer is no. I started by saying this call is not a national call. It is a sectional call, a section of people, a group across the state. And this group do not even represent the interest of that entire state. So at the end of the day, if you ask me sincerely, it is not even a wild chase on the part of the National Assembly. It is just a National Assembly that are very, very quiet in recent time, looking for something to be in the news, to stay relevant, to appear we are doing something. So they just want to be seen to be doing something. Outside that, they should have known that what we need right now is to strengthen our institutions. And strengthening those institutions will mean review some of the enabling laws, some of the laws that enacted some of these institutions that made it in such a way that one man can wake up tomorrow and override the EFCC. One man can wake up, for example, and override ICPC. One man can sit in a phone call, is influencing. The National Assembly should be looking for a way to give us sustainability, something that the coming generation will grow up to meet, not further thinking about balkanizing the country like I've made. So will it see the light of the day? The answer is a no. Take up to the state level. It is.
When you say that these recommendations are sectional, not coming from the Nigerian people, are you aware that the Constitutional Review Committee of the House of Assembly did whole town hall meetings, collected memorandum from across all the 6 geopolitical zones? It is these things that they aggregated. People went to those town hall meetings and made submissions. People submitted memorandum, to the committee. And it is from those recommendations that they came out with 31 states. Why do you say that these demands are sectional?
Mr. Okoro, do not allow us to dive into that constitution review issue, because you and I are fully aware.
Exactly what happened. Because the House has also said, look, this thing is not coming from us. It's coming from the Nigerian people. They asked for it. And so we have to tell you this is what Nigerians are looking for.
Just now, let's the participant that now how it really reprints the interest. You and I know that attendance to that conference was strictly on political patronage. It was, in fact, I should be quoted, that attendance to that conference was strictly on political patronage. That's really because they are representing the group or the interest of whatever group they came from. It was mainly because of the giving and those who nominate them. Attendance was purely nomination. We know those who persons were there. They were nominated, and it was purely on the ground of convenience and patronage. So does that conference even have the legitimacy first to represent the interest of Nigeria? That is a subject of another discussion. So having said that, you have said that from that conference they aggregated and they decided to create 31 states. On ground, did they even reach those recommendations? That is another question we should begin to ask ourselves. Those who are recommending 31 states because they attended a national confab, you will now ask, that recommendation, if it was even ever made, was it feasible? Was it viable? Was it sustainable? A right-thinking person, an educated and a right-thinking person that have Nigeria at heart, will not even go to such conference to begin to recommend balkanization. First of all, why is agitation and tension feeling cheated? Why are people feeling cheated? It is bad management of example. Before the last governorship election in the Edo State, there is this cliche in a section of the state, call it Esan agenda. Accidentally, I'm an Esan man. So even though I am happy that an Esan man is now the governor of Edo, but the reality is I have never been a fan, a proponent of that word Esan agenda. Just as I do not believe in the Edo agenda, I do not believe in the agenda. I do not think that the man that will fix Nigeria must come from a particular ethnic group or a particular.
All right, Mr. Jato, I'll come back to you. Let's get reaction from our guest in Oka, Dr. Henry Duru. Now, Doctor, good to have you back. Dr. Henry, I want us to look at the present state structure and recommendations made by the committee, according to them, coming from Nigerians. Presently, we have the Southwest with 6 states, and the recommendation gives them 7 more states to bring it to 13. South-South has 6, 4 more states to bring it to 10. Southeast has 5 more states to bring it to 10. Northwest has 7, 4 more to bring it to 11. North Central has 6 and 7 more to bring it to 13. Now, Northeast has 6, 5 more to bring it to 11, a total of 67 states. I want us to look at the place of equity in all of this. The Southeast has been sustained for a very long time. The only region out of the 6 geopolitical zones with 5 number of states. In fact, the Northwest has even 7. Now, in the midst of all of this, new recommendations have been made, and Southeast is still short-changed. What is the place of equity in all of this? And do you think it's going to stop the problem of agitation in the Southeast?
Thank you very much. Even though I'm not exactly convinced that creating more states is actually what we need to develop as a people, but then I see that for sake of sense of belonging and equity, we need to balance things out in this country. Before now, the Southeast had up till now, the Southeast has the least number of states. It's having 5, others have 6 each, with the Northwest having 7. And now, if we talk about state creation, one thing that should be uppermost in our minds, the quest for equity. We should not create more problems in the country, because the fact that Southeast has since been shortchanged has been hitting up the polity. We have seen it basis of certain agitations in the country. So why creating this one, assuming this one will actually see the light of day, even though it, what we should actually have uppermost in our minds is to use the opportunity to bring about that equity, that much desired equity. We shouldn't create more problems by allowing a certain region to have up to 13, while some others have less than that. So Southeast that we have now, I think such opportunities should be used to solve that one without actually creating more of such problems. But then that is still subject to that belief that I have that state creation is not actually what we need to develop, to grow as a nation. But if there should be one, then that principle of equity should be conformed to.
Okay, Dr. Henry, we are just holding a conversation, and the argument is this. Let us even concede, that the federal government or that the National Assembly will create more states. That's on the basis of this argument, of this discussion. Both of you have said, look, you don't even need, that Nigeria doesn't need more states. You are not the only one that has said that. Afenifere said that, Olabode George said that, and even a section of Ohanese has said that, look, we don't even need more states. But the factional deputy president general of Ohanese and Igbo, Okechukwu Isiguzoro, has rejected a recommendation saying that, look, before you even start talking about creating new states, you need to equalize. The Southeast needs to be at par with other zones. Now, let's localize this conversation. Henry, you are from the Southeast. I want to have your reaction. Assuming that the Nigerian state wants to create an additional state for the Southeast, which of the requests will you, in your opinion, say, look, this state needs to be created for the Southeast for the sake of equity? Is it Olo State? Is it Etiti, that is the equity state? Is it Aba State? Or is it which other state coming from Enugu State? Which one will you prefer? Which one will you recommend if you were in a position to do that?
That is a very difficult one, Mr. Okoro.
Is it Anioma? How difficult can it be? I mean, you live in the Southeast. You feel the pulse of the people. You should be able to tell. You're a doctor. You're a communication expert. I know you are very good in history and strategic studies.
It's a very difficult thing to say because I didn't know the logic behind those proposals we have in the Southeast. But some people had actually thought about it, and I was sort of having this soft spot for equity state because of the fact that it's the boundaries of that state actually, or the proposed state actually incorporate a majority of the states within the region. So that will sort of douse some of the tensions, agitations as to we are the ones to have the new state, we are the ones to have the new state. That is among the different parts of the Southeast. So that is just my view. But then, the conversation might be broader. Let's also hear the views of the people, the reasons advanced by the people who are also calling for creation of these other states, the people coming up with the proposals for these other states.
One of the views is that of Ned Nwoko, senator representing Delta, one of those territorial zones in Delta, and he said, recently he jumped from PDP to APC, saying that, look, APC promised me that if I come over, they are going to create an Anioma state for me. Now, the proposal for Anioma is that 3 local governments will be carved out from Anambra State. The whole of Asaba, the Igbo-speaking part of Delta State, the Ika people, though the Ika people have rejected it, the Asaba, Ogwashuku, Iseluku, all those Igbo-speaking parts of Delta, up until Abo, will be part of that state. Then you go back to River State, where you have the Omoku, Emoha, the Andoni, all of those people will now, from one state, technically bringing all the Igbo people outside the Southeast, called Southeast, into one state. That is Ned Nwoko's argument. Now that you have that idea, which one will you support going forward?
That will be dependent on whether the people that are involved in that very arrangement are in unison, because once there are arguments, just like you mentioned that certain persons in Delta State have actually dissociated themselves from that proposal. So once it's something that is going to create divisions, for instance, it's possible that after creating such states, there will be cleavages, along the sub-ethnic groups. Because you know that just like any other ethnic group, any other large ethnic group, the Igbo group is also made up of sub-ethnic groups. That is why at times you have this intra-ethnic rivalry, within the larger ethnic group. So I'm foreseeing a situation where if such an arrangement is made, there will be cleavages, within that very state, cleavages of sub-ethnic nature. So that is why I have my misgiving about that very arrangement, because it's going to, it's something that will cross boundaries. That is the boundary of Southeast and South-South. So I think that one is going to be more difficult, and we may not be able to predict the outcome at the end of the day.
Creating some kind of diversity. But if you look at the South-South is the most diverse region in this country. You have the Ijaws, you have the Ikwere, you have the Eba, you have the Shekiri, you have the Urobo, you have the Bini, the Edo, and all of those people. And okay, now let's get a reaction from our guest from that joined us from our Benin studio, Mr. Blessed Jato. Mr. Jato, permit me to put you on the spot now. You are from the South-South, and let's assume that they want to create one state from the South-South. Which one would you recommend if you were in position to do that?
Well, thank you. You have said you want to put me on the spot. And that spot, honestly, if I'm in a position to recommend, I will not recommend. And I'll tell you why. I am a proponent of the fact that what we need right now in the South-South is not new states. And if you ask me to recommend, if you are to put a gun in my neck, on my head, and ask me to recommend nilly-willy, I may still not want to recommend. So if I have seen the proposal as far as South-South is concerned, and I really do not think I will want to even be in the spot. And my thought is very different. Okoro, let me tell you something. You see, in programming, as a program expert, there's what we call a theory of change. And when we are designing a theory of change, we always tell people, don't design solutions that for a problem you have identified. Go a little further to ask yourself, what is the cause of this problem? People are feeling marginalized. People are feeling left out. What is the cause? Is creation of state look like a capsule coating of the sore of the problem? We must begin to look beyond this agitation for state creation. Again, there's something that we call do no harm. Creation of new states in each of the region will further increase the tension and agitation. Because for every one ethnic group you favor by creating a state for them, you are giving place for other ethnic groups to rise up to demand. At the end of the day, assuming this 31 scale through, in the next couple of years, we may be looking at creating maybe 50 more to suit every chance of the Nigerian society. So that is why I will not even want a line in the face to be in the spot. We must begin to look at the doom of this policy. It will do more damage to Nigeria. It will do good to Nigeria. Look at it and go. For example, give the Benin their own states. Next son will rise up to demand their own state. The Afemines will rise up to demand their own state. The Esakos will rise up to demand their own state. At the end of the day, what are you doing? You are balkanizing the entire system and making it of the evil.
All right, Mr. Jato, we are running out of time, so we need to get concluding thoughts now. Let me ask you, if we have this kind of problem with the number of states we have, the agitation for most states, if we reverse to regionalism, these problems will then be solved? Because if you go back to regionalism, these sub-ethnic nationalities will also be in one region, and they will have to be headed by, there's always a majority. There's always a majority. It's because of this, the fear for domination by the majority. That was what actually led to the creation of most states. Now, if we reverse to regionalism, will that problem be solved?
Extent, it will douse the problem to a large extent than it will do when you are creating more states. One of the beauty about regionalization is the issue of culture and ethnicity. Most of this group of persons within that region, they identify, they have similar culture, similar identity. Now, like I mentioned at the beginning of this program, most of this challenge we have in Nigeria, we must begin to find cultural solution to them, because it is an individual, it is a behavioral problem. When somebody is looting our collective patrimony, it's a behavioral back to a disconnect between that person and moral values. We must begin to, now, like you asked me earlier, we release self from the equation. It's very simple. We must begin to talk to the conscience of Nigeria. To Nigeria first. Ethnicity before party affiliation, before personal interest and aggrandizement. We must see that we have all come to a country that we will die and live. And when we are out of this system, it is the legacies that we leave that will be remembered after all, not the money we amass, or not the group we give our loyalty and our sentiment to, but what we are able to do for future generation to come and see. So the key is to go back to culture, look at how we can use culture to address some of this problem. And again, we must begin to speak to every individual conscience. If we put Nigeria first, most of this agitation will come to an end. That is the truth.
Mr. Jato, I'm just trying to understand how different people can identify with each other when they are in one region, but the same people cannot identify with one another when they are in the same state. All right, Dr. Henry, what's your reaction to this issue? Should we go back to regionalism, or should we stay as we are? Should we create more states? Okay, you are clearly against creating more states. Now, should we go back to regionalism? Is it going to solve the problem of agitation?
It's not going to solve the problem of agitation.
Yeah. Where do we go from here?
Where we go from there, I was trying to make a particular point earlier when I was talking about creation of states and how the thing will multiply our problems. Yeah, the states or the regions are not the problem, but the problem is the fact that the institution of the state is so weak that a whole lot of things are getting wrong with the system. So by the time you create more states, because the system is corrupt, you are also creating more corrupt governments. During the First Republic, we might say, for instance, that we had 4 corrupt regional governments. If you have 36 states, you are now having 36 corrupt state governments. So that is how our resources will continue to be vandalized because of weak state institutions. So remaining as we are, or going back to regionalism, is not only the root of our or the root of the solution to our problems. The solution to our problem is to build our institutions, strengthen the institutions as we have them today.
Okay.
If we strengthen them and the institutions begin to work the way they should work.
I'll take that as a concluding thought, because we are clearly out of time. Maybe we'll have to visit this topic next time. Mr. Jato, can we have your concluding thoughts in just 30 seconds, please?
In 30 seconds, I want to appeal to Nigeria first. See Nigeria as your project. See Nigeria as something that God has entrusted to your hand. For every political appointee and everybody elected into one office or the other, if we all put Nigeria first and do the right thing, and equally distribute opportunities and resource to all persons and to all regions, this tension and agitation will reduce. It's all about putting Nigeria first.
Very much, Mr. Blessed Jato. Now, this is where we wrap up this show, Political Lens on Voice of the People Television. We've been speaking with Dr. Henry Duru. Dr. Henry is a communication expert as well as a political affairs analyst. He joined us from our Oka outstation. We also had Mr. Blessed Jato. Mr. Blessed Jato is a man of many parts. He's an analyst, he's an advisor on peace and security to ECOWAS and United Nations and all of that. Gentlemen, thanks for coming to this show. Now, on behalf of the backroom staff, Vivian Oguche, the man that manned the PCR, OG, that's Olusegun George, the technical director, Alex at the Ingest, and the sound engineer, Pastor Paul. I am Chukwuma Okoro. Thanks for coming to this show. Join us same time tomorrow at 6 o'clock for another interesting edition of Political Lens. From me here, it's a good night and bye for now.